This conference will now be recorded.
Right. So in the hospital management system, what we did is like we have created epics. In each and every epic, we have different user stories, which we have already written here. Now here is a backlog. Backlog nothing but whatever the user stories and all everything will be there in the backlog. Now what we did, we have given user stories because the very first thing what we have to do, whenever we write user stories, whichever is in the backlog, first of all we have to give story points. So how to create story points was already mentioned. Now I am going to provide you a roadmap here. So let us create a roadmap for everything. Because roadmap creation is something connecting to the release planning process. Because whatever the release we are planning, any part of the work what we do and all of the things. So for that generally this is being connecting with this epics all that. So I am going to provide an epic duration here. So wherein first of all we have to select the each and every epic, whatever the epic we have, because user story is done. Because in that epic we have different user stories. Now, if you want to give you the timelines and all everything for the epic, I am audible to you, right? Is it audible to you?
Yeah.
Right. So whenever we are giving timelines, whenever we want to give timelines for each and every epic, there are options because quarter, months, weeks, all that. Normally, we follow months timelines here because if it is in roadmap, I'm talking about. But whereas when it comes to sprints and all everything, that will be calculated in weeks of time. So what I'm doing is that I'm just taking epic because these epics customer has to complete within the customer is expecting us to complete as a list. This is what their plan is. Now what we have to do is first of all we have to select the duration for every epic. Okay. Now what's the date today? 23rd. Okay. 23rd onwards till I am 5th May, right? So till 5th May we are supposed to complete. This is what the epic we have planned for the first epic. Whereas when it comes to the second epic, let us assume that, right? Second epic, when we are planning, for example, we are planning. Now the third epic. Third epic is also almost on the same. We are planning is from 27, right? We want this to be completed now.
Raj, I cannot hear you. Lot of disturbance is coming.
The reason I'm asking, a minute. Okay, is it fine now? So, Suraj,
No, I cannot hear you.
am I audible now?
Oops. There is some disturbance is coming with your voice.
Because I am in my room actually. I closed my door. So can you see now? Is it fine? Right. Am I audible now? You Suraj?
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear right now.
Okay. Right. So what we have to provide is we have provided for facility management, wherein the next epic will be inventory management, wherein we have given timeline from 29th March to which we were planning to complete by 16th. Now, staff management, hardly we have only one user story. This we are planning from 4th April to 28th April. Okay, this is what generally the product roadmap, followed by whatever ethics and all that. So product roadmap has created. Now, in this backlog, we have already had all the user stories. What we have to do first, we have to do the sprint plan. How many story points we have? Total 22 story points. Remember, whatever the amount of work we do is based on the story point sometimes. Sometimes we take user stories into consideration, but for every user story, there are some story points we have given. So story points are also a parameter will be taken for us to see. For example, if there are 20 story points, how many were completed? For example, 20 story points completed, 2 may be the balance. Why? Because whenever we want to plan velocity for any of the project, because what is the difference between velocity and burn down chart? Sprint burn down chart will tell you the health of the project. Sprint burn down chart will tell you the health of the project. Means how many user stories we have and how many completed by your team. Let's say there are 10 user stories. Out of 10, 6 completed, 4 is the balance. Right? That is what generally sprint burn down chart tells you. But whereas when it comes to the velocity reports, right here you can see here, right? Velocity reports. I'll show you the reports here. So you can go to these features. And you can enable the reports here. Right. You can enable reports here. So whenever we go for reports, what happens? Normally there are two kind of reports we prepare. One is sprint bundle charts, and second is velocity report. Sprint bundle chart will tell you how much amount of user stories or how much amount of user stories we have completed for the particular task, for the particular sprint. Now, velocity means once the sprint is completed, velocity will be done. For example, there were 40 user stories we want to complete in 3 months of time. As assured that we have in the first sprint, we have 4 user stories, second sprint, we have 4. By combining both, it must be 8, but 6 completed, 2 balance. If the same thing will be continued, Scrum Master will have a doubt whether this release plan will be successful or not. So for that reason, in order to know about the reason behind that, this velocity report will be prepared. Means in this velocity report, what we do, we identify the velocity. What is the amount of velocity? Means capacity of the team versus the amount of work which we are supposed to complete. So we have to compare. So based on that, what we do, we'll be knowing about what exactly the reason means. What is the high level understanding about this and all everything will be knowing because of the velocity report all that. Okay, this is what we'll release the thing. Now this is what velocity reports I'll explain it later. Okay, now what we are doing now, there are backlogs. Now what I'm doing, we have to do the sprint plan. In this, it is you see, whenever we are planning the sprint, it is not depends on the epic. In epic, it need not be that. For example, in this epic, there are 2 user stories that we don't require 2 user stories. It's depending. Maybe in each and every epic, 1 or 2 user stories can also be picked for sprint plan. So there is nothing like it's purely depends on the priority what is it. Now, customer is fast. First, what customer is asking you, user, I need to have an option to enter patient details so that I can see from there. Okay. I need to have an option to update demographics. It's not required. See the list of doctors list. So first of all, this is required, right? So list of doctors. This is required. Right? Now, quality efficiency is not required. Option to update medical inventory. It is updated. All the employee records. Now, these two are in the first screen. These two are. This is because these are the two remaining two customers. Because customer can see the doctor's availability. At the same time, user can whoever the user is activate the patient details. Right? These are the two user stories we have taken up. Now, what else can be added in
Raj,
this?
your voice is not clear. I cannot hear you any. I didn't hear anything what you said.
Is it clear now?
Yeah,
Am I clear now?
yeah. Right now you're clear.
Okay. So here, how many user stories we have taken? How many we have taken? How many we have taken?
I cannot hear you. What did you say?
What I'm asking is how many user stories we have taken on first sprint?
I didn't hear you. What do you said in the last 5 minutes?
What I'm asking is how many user stories we have taken on first sprint here?
Two user stories?
Right. So what? How many more can we take? Because one is for patient details entry and second is about doctor's availability. Can you tell me one more user story which can be added into the sprint, which is something nearer to those user stories?
The facility management?
Facility management not required here, right? Because here this is the MVP, means first sprint. In first sprint, what required? Entering the patient details and
Mm-hmm.
identifying the doctor's availability, right? So these are the two important things. Apart from two, demographics is required, right? We need to have an option
Okay.
for demographics. So facility management and everything will be different. That's a different thing, okay? Because that
Okay.
may not be required immediately to the customer. What is that they required when we are developing hospital management system? They require a customer has to identify the patient records. Next, they want to update the demographics. At the same time, they want to update the patient details, all that, right? These three are required. So how many story points we have? We
Three,
have total 7 story
seven,
points.
seven story points.
Each and every user story we have already given. So in this first sprint, we have to complete 7 story points. Now you want to start the sprint, right? Because everything done, because sprint identification done, planning done, we have taken the user stories based on the priority. Now we are in a process of starting down the sprint. Whenever you want to start the sprint, here you have an option called start sprint. You can see this, right? Start sprint, start sprint. Whenever you click on start sprint, now it will ask you the duration. Is it 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks? Now, for example, if this is 7 story points, assume that it is taking 5 hours for every story, right? Assume that 35 hours. So assume that in 1 week we can complete, right? Roughly I'm saying 1 week. It's a 1 week sprint. It's not 2 week sprint. We are planning for 1 week. So it starts in 23rd and it will be ended by 30th, right? So start date and end date will be there here. Understood clearly, right? But in reality, if you're talking about 23rd to 30th, how many days it is? 7 days. But when we calculate about week, how many working days? How many working days? We have
5.
only 5 working days. If there is any national holidays, that also should be calculated. So that's the reason what we are doing. We are calculating 2 weeks. If it was not 2 weeks, if I've calculated 1 week, hardly you are getting only 5 days. So in 5 days, the whole user stories what we have taken may not be completed by the team. Hence, how many weeks we have selected? 2 weeks. 2 weeks means 10 working days. If you don't have any national holidays or something, if you have anything anyway, it has to be. So sprint goal we have to give. What is the sprint goal here? Here, admin has to mention all the required details of the patients, required details of the patients. Followed by that, patients should have a provision of uh, of identifying doctor's availability for appointment. Okay, right, appointment. So this is what generally the sprint goal, because these three user stories combined, sprint goal is this. Okay, this we have to achieve. Now here there is an option called start. The sprint has started. Now you can see everything is on board, right? This is the board we looks like, something like Kanban board it looks like. So here you can see everything to do, right? These are all three are in the to do progress because we haven't started anything of that sort. Depends now from here onwards what will happen. Now developers will write the code. Whatever the code they write and all everything will be repository stored in the repository. Here you have an option called connect. So if you can connect on the connect button, connect this Bitbucket, what will happen? Whatever the code developer will written from right from now onwards, everything will be stored there. Normally, this connectivities, configurations, and all everything will be looking after by the Jira administrators, right? They are the one who is looking after all the things. Jira administrators will take care of all that. Now, here you can see board where we have mentioned all that information. Next, if you have an option here called project settings, okay, project settings. Here you have an option where we can see the project settings on that, right? So project settings are there here because if you want, you can update the project settings. Details you can update if you want. Next, board, right? If you want to edit any sort of board, for example, if you want to edit any sort of columns or custom filters like card coverages, everything can be done. But normally this configuration, board settings and all will be looking after by the Jira admin, not by the Scrum Master or something. Now, for example, being a Scrum Master, you need to have, this is required for you. Being a Scrum Master, roadmap was enabled, backlog was enabled, reports were enabled. Now, board, the Scrum Kanban board is not required anyway because we are working on Scrum. Next, Scrum was enabled. Estimation, you can see estimation was also enabled here based on the story points. Okay. Next, development code was enabled, configured, and release also we have connected. Release also. Now deployment will not be taken place. Like for example, this is not needed. So project pages for them. Now, whenever you are working on the project, it's whatever the project settings we have, it depends on our interest, depends on the team requirement and all. Whatever the features we want, we have an option where we can enable or disable. Absolutely is our choice. Remember, when there is a configurations or settings, everything is required. Jira administrators will be there for the project, who will be taking care of all that, right? Jira admins will look after all that. Now, here we have created a board. Now, for example, assume that one is under progress, right? Two is under progress, right? For example. Now, here you can see, normally this is where generally reports, burned up reports and all everything comes into picture. Now, you can see here sprint burn down chart. In this sprint burn down chart, right? So here, because we have, our work has not completed so far, because whatever the story points we have and all everything was not completed here as such. So whenever it is completed, then yes, we can take into consideration, because story points are the things we are taking into consideration. Because on what basis estimation you are calculating? For example, in that first sprint, how many story points you have? 7 story points, right? Right? So 7 story points. In this 7 story points, assume that there were only 5 completed. Okay. Now, let's say, as assume that, right? For example, this is completed. 2 are in issue state, right? 2 are in the progress state, for example. Right? This you need not drag and drop, because in the configuration button you have an option. Once the sprint is completed, automatically user story is completed, automatically it will show you as sprint done, right? Sprint closed. That you can see the option there. But we have to do that automation process. We have to configure it. Admins and all, everybody will calculate that and we'll do that. So there is an amount of work, whatever the changes we have made so far and all, everything you can see here. Whatever is incomplete, whatever is under progress, means whatever the amount of task we have completed so far in reference to the application development itself is concerned, you can see each and everything here in the burndown chart itself. Because for example, sprint 1, any scope you have identified? Do you have any scope? Is there any scope you see? Any scope?
No.
No. There is no scope. Why? Because the scope was not fine. Because the scope, there is nothing as scope as we see here. Okay. Now I'm selecting the story points. Now, how many are in progress? How many are in progress? There are 2 user stories which are under progress, right? You can see here, incomplete. How many completed? We have 1 completed. Now, do you have any sort of issues which are outside of the sprint? Out of the sprint, do you have any issues? Do we have anything? We don't
No.
have any issues which is there out of the sprint. So sprint burndown chart will tell you, will evaluate you how many user stories we have. So you can see here the report. How many story points we have done? 3 story points was done so far, right? 3 story. Why? Because appointments. This, as a doctor, I need to see the list of networks that this user story was completed. For this, whatever the story points we have given 3 story points. That's the reason why you can see 3 story points were completed so far. And how many are the balances now? We have 4 balance, right? Now, if it is a story points we are taking, for example, when we are taking issue, right? Based on the issues we are taking, this is again it's different. Issue count means issue. What's the difference? Means there is no difference. Issue means 1 user story. How many user stories we are seeing here? There are 1 user story which is completed so far out of 3, right? That is what it is saying. But if you are converting into story points, it will show you as a point wise. But here, what we have selected, we have not selected any story points. What we have selected, we have selected the issue count. That's the reason why it is showing us issue count here. Now, estimation, for example, timelines you have taken. So if you want, you can take the timelines also. But normally we don't take timelines into consideration, because for that what is required is estimation of timelines have to be done. So that's the reason why most of the times we focus more on the story points, because story points will give you an exact figure of the work what we have completed in this. This is what generally sprint burn down. So if someone is asking you about the health of the project can be done using this sprint burn down chart. So burn down charts and all, everything is being used to tell you the health of the project. Health means status of the project, means is it going according to the plan what you have made so far or not, right? Is it according to the plan we have made so far, or is there anything balances we have identified? Everything can be seen under this sprint bundle chart. So if someone is asking you how you are calculating the health, the answer is that preparing these bundle charts and all, everything, by preparing all this, we can calculate the health of the project. Understood? Clear? Suruchi, right? Clear or not? Right?
Yeah, clear.
Yeah, clear. Right? Now, burn up reports. Burn up reports normally we don't use, because burn up reports don't see much use of burn up reports and all once we are good with this thing. But whereas for the burn up reports, you can see the same thing. How many user stories we have completed? 3 user story points we have completed. And you can see how many are there. 7 story points we have. 3 we have completed, and still we have 4 is the balance. And what is the work scope here? Work scope is there till April 5th. More than April 5th it will be. So we must ensure that by 6th April all this work has to be completed. This is what generally burn up reports and all everything we can see here. Means whatever the amount of work we have, because this is all whatever you can see in below to this is everything called as log. We call it as log. Logs means whatever the amount of work we have completed so far, everything can be seen in this log here, right? This is what generally log stands for. So whatever changes we have made, where what is completed, what is there, everything. So how much scope we have? Story points conversation is 7 scope. Why? Because 7 story points has to be completed. But what we have taken is we have taken only what we call we have taken only uh, three story points we have completed out of 7. So 4 is the balance which we are supposed to complete. But still, do we have time or not? That is what we have to see, because 23rd March, in how many days this can be completed? Sometimes one user story may be taking 3-4 days time for you to complete, because being a team, normally there are different things. For example, you are the person who will be looking after the user interface designs and all, but you are not only the person, right? Apart from the database designing team, other people will also be there. At the same time, there is a proper interconnect among the functionalities. For example, you are creating user interface. As long as you are not creating user interface, how can these people do the database connect? So if they want to do some database connect and all, what is that they require? There must be a proper connect with the there must be a proper connect with the user stories. Also, there must be a proper connect with the uh, right. So whatever the user stories we have taken, there must be a proper connect with the stories what we have created earlier so far, right? That we have to see it, because whatever the user stories we have taken on the sprint, that sprint that has to be completed without having any kind of difficulty here. So we must be knowing about the calculation of the sprint. What is the sprint we have taken? How many story points? There is a possibility that all the story points cannot be completed in less time. Let's say 7 story points, we have completed 3, we have 4. Are we completing in how many days? One story might be taken 3 days. Remaining other two user stories may be taken 4 days or 5 days time, which is not. But you have to make ensure how many weeks sprint is this. This sprint is duration of 2 weeks. So being a Scrum Master, it is your responsibility to track the progress of work based on preparing sprint burn down. So sprint burn down is the major task being a Scrum Master you have to do. Apart from the other one, like apart from velocity reports and all everything, sprint burn down chat and all. Depends on the work what you have completed, all these things will be changed here. So if you can see here, for example, 2 more completed, 2 plus 3, 5. You can go for reports, sprint burn down. Let me refresh it. You can see how many we have completed. We have completed one here, right? 3 story points we have completed. Again, after that, we have completed 2 more user stories. So 3 plus 2, 5 user stories we have completed. How many actually? 7. 5 plus 2, 3 plus 2, 5. 7 minus 5, 2 story points should be completed at. So whatever the log and all everything, you can see here. 2 user stories were completed. One is under the progress state. Clear to you, Suruchi? Is it clear to you?
Yeah.
Understand?
Mm-hmm.
Right? This cumulative flow diagrams and all, whatever I see, whatever you see here, this cumulative diagrams and all, we do in Kanban normally, not in Scrum, because all the reports won't be doing Scrum. Because in Scrum, major reports what we prepare is one is about sprint burn down charts to know about the how much work we have completed so far, all that. Next, velocity report, because velocity is also required, because how much we have completed so far and what is that balance we have? Are they really capable enough to complete that velocity? Means our team has that capacity to complete it or not. Everything can be seen in the velocity. So based on that, being a scrum master, you will be knowing about the situation, because you need to know the reality here, right? It's not something like exaggeration, not just by word, right? Everything should be authenticated, and formally you must be knowing how much, if this is the case continues and all, really are we really capable enough to complete the sprint or not? You have to decide, because it will be affecting on the release planning, right? So that you have to see. So for that this sprint burndown chart and as well as velocity reports will be prepared by the scrum master once the sprint planning done, once the sprint is completing, in the state of completing, I'm saying. But for velocity you must complete the sprint. Without completion of the sprint you cannot see the velocity. Why? Because velocity is the one will be telling you about the status. There are three user stories. Is this completed? Three? No, two completed, only one balance. Means in this sprint we are supposed to complete three, but our team has completed only two. So when you come to know about the actual status, when sprint is closed and sprint completed, then only you will be knowing about the velocity. Based on that, what is the precautionary measures to be taken in order to reduce this complexity? Sometimes maybe technical difficulties of the people might be arise. Sometimes maybe infrastructural changes. Sometimes these people don't know the technology well, right? Some people may be failed in it, or else there may be some stress management issues where they couldn't handle the stress properly. So there are multiple reasons for laziness, maybe, right? Maybe even though everything is good, they, because of laziness, they are not completing work on time. There could be many reasons. So how come we know? Whenever we do the velocity report, then only we come to know that what is the situation. So based on that, being a scrum master, what is the decision to be taken, to whom we have to call for meeting, right? How to, if it is not possible from your end, how to escalate this issue to the higher management. That decision, being a scrum master, you have to take, followed by that. Normally this cumulative flow diagrams and all, if you are following a practice of Kanban, because not in Scrum. If we are following Kanban project, because if project is working on Kanban, then this cumulative flow diagrams and all, everything comes into picture. Otherwise, we don't use it. Understand? Clear?
Yes.
Yes. So this is all for today. And tomorrow we discuss about the velocity part. Velocity report
Okay.
and all everything we discuss tomorrow. But for that,
So
we have to complete one sprint.
I have a question. If we cannot finish everything in one sprint, so we can uh, put that
Uh,
user story in the other sprint.
yes, with the consent of, see, normally, yeah, whatever the question you have asked is valid. The first point is that if you have finalized, you have to complete on the sprint, right? This is the first
Mm.
fundamental rule. Second, but there is a condition called else. If not, this is your
Mm-hmm.
question.
Right.
Else, right? Else means, for example, one user story was not done. What we do? That user story will be kept under product backlog again. Again, you will be going to product backlog. Again, you are going to
Oh, okay.
backlog, right? You are going to backlog again, and that user story again you are putting on the product backlog. Again, product backlog grooming will be happens. Product
Mm-hmm.
backlog grooming has happened, so you are not taking that as a high priority in the second sprint, right? For example, this is not completed. Assume that, right? This is not. So what you are
Hmm.
doing it, you are moving it to the backlog. If means if the condition arises, I'm saying, right? If that condition arises, you are keeping this user story back to the backlog. Again, refinement process happens. Again, from these issues, we are taking few more and we are creating one more sprint. We can create
Okay.
one more sprint. So when you are completing, once the sprint is completed, first sprint, you can create one more sprint, and whatever this 7 user story is there, right? Assume that it was not done. It will be under the backlog refinement process, and you put this 7 number in the second sprint, and we start working.
Okay.
Clear? There will be conditions sometimes. Sometimes that's where generally product backlog refinement happens. Product backlog refinement means you are refining the backlog all the time.
So
Refining
this
the backlog.
every day we do the daily Scrum meetings, right?
No. No. Backlog refinement you don't do daily.
Okay. We do only once a month.
one sprint completed. It's not
Okay.
even a month also. See,
Okay.
backlog refinement, when do you require? When there is a provision, when there is a requirement. When do you get the requirement? When
Okay.
anything to be added into this or something, then only refinement takes place, right? Right or not?
Okay.
Backlog refinement. So whenever there is one user story which is balanced, that whenever you
Mm-hmm.
are keeping, then the backlog refinement happens. There is nothing like every month we have to do something. It depends on the cycle of the sprint. Depends
Okay.
on the cycle of the sprint, that will be varied. Refinement. Whenever we want, that refinement will do. And once the sprint is completed, this is the balance. This you are transferring here. You are creating one more sprint. Again, backlog refinement process happens. Again, in second sprint, how many user stories you are putting? That also will be planned accordingly.
Okay.
Clear, Surji?
Yeah.
Right. So we discussed about that. We create two more sprints here because we have 15, right? So we create two more and we see again. I'll show you. At least two to three sprints if you see, so that you'll have an idea. Not with
Okay.
one sprint. Hmm?
Right. Right.
Okay then. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.